He didn't notice the silence at first. It crept in slowly, replacing the usual morning sounds of the Thai coastline, the hum of motorbikes, the chatter of vendors setting up their stalls, the rattle of fishing nets being dragged across sand. The boy was 8, sweeping leaves from the wooden steps of the small home he shared with his mother. The sun had barely lifted over the water, casting long streaks of orange light across the village. Everything looked ordinary until the ground shuddered under him like a giant exhaling through the earth. He froze. The broom slipped from his fingers. A vibration rolled up his legs, faint but steady. His mother stepped out of the doorway with a bundle of laundry in her arms and looked toward the beach. Others were doing the same. Birds that usually cluttered the rooftops scattered all at once, as if something had startled them. The boy followed his mother's gaze and saw people gathering at the shoreline, pointing, stepping backward in confusion. The tide was pulling away, farther and faster than anyone had ever seen. Boats rested on their sides like abandoned toys. Fish flopped helplessly on the exposed sand. A shout rose from the beach. Someone screamed for everyone to run. The boy felt his mother's hand clamp down on his shoulder, steady but trembling. She pushed him inside and told him not to move, but he couldn't help inching toward the window. He wanted to understand why the ocean had emptied itself. Before he could take another breath, the sound hit. A low, rolling thunder that grew into a roar so loud it rattled the walls. The sea returned in a single, towering surge. Water slammed into the village with a force that tore homes apart. The windows burst inward, spraying the boy with shards of glass. He fell backward as the first wave swept through the room, lifting him off the floor and pinning him against the far wall. He tried to call for his mother, but the second wave crashed through the collapsing doorway, swallowing his voice and everything around him. The house dissolved into pieces as the current dragged him into open water filled with splintered wood, broken roofs, and the remains of everyday life that had been normal only seconds earlier. He flailed blindly, lungs burning, arms swinging through muddy water. Something heavy struck his leg. Another piece of debris clipped his shoulder. The current spun him so fast he didn't know which direction was up until his head broke the surface. He gasped, sucked in air and seawater, and coughed violently as the waves tossed him like a branch in a river. He reached for anything solid. His fingers brushed a tree limb, a rope, a plastic bucket. None stayed within reach. Then something bumped against him, a soft, buoyant shape rolling on the water. It brushed past once, then again, and he recognized the soaked fabric and familiar weight. His mattress, the one he had slept on 2 hours earlier. He lunged for it, wrapping both arms around the edges as the wave lifted them together. It dipped under his weight, but didn't sink. The mattress rose and steadied, becoming the only solid thing he had left. The water pushed him inland, dragging him between shattered buildings and through what had once been narrow streets. A motorcycle cart floated by upside down. A clay pot shattered against a tree trunk. The boy clung to the mattress as it slammed into debris, jerking him with each collision. Branches tore at his arms. Something metallic scraped across his ribs. He kept his face pressed against the mattress, breathing through the soaked fabric whenever a wave washed over him. The surge carried him deep into a patch of forest where the water finally slowed. He drifted in circles, trembling from cold and shock. The world had gone strangely quiet, broken only by distant screams and the crackling of fires sparked by broken electrical lines. He tried to call out for his mother, but could barely get the word out. His throat was raw, and the sound vanished into the humid air. Time stopped mattering. Minutes felt like hours. He clung to the mattress so tightly his arms ached. Whenever he loosened his grip even slightly, panic surged through him. The mattress had become the thin line between life and death, and he treated it like something alive, something he had to hold on to, no matter how numb his hands grew. As the sun passed overhead, the water level receded slowly, leaving the boy stranded in a muddy basin filled with wreckage. A refrigerator floated nearby. A broken guitar drifted between branches. He stared at objects that once belonged to people he knew, now stripped of meaning. He wondered if his mother was somewhere nearby, calling for him, clinging to something like he was. He didn't know she had been taken by the first wave, gone before he had even realized she wasn't beside him. Late in the afternoon, rescue workers moved through the area in small boats, calling out and checking anything that looked out of place. One man spotted the mattress wedged between a tree and a collapsed wall. At first he thought it was debris. Then he saw a small hand curled around the corner of it. When they approached, the boy's eyes flickered open just enough to meet theirs before he slipped into a dazed half-consciousness. They lifted him gently, careful not to jostle his broken arm. At the field hospital, volunteers cleaned the mud from his hair and stitched the gashes that ran down his legs. He winced, but didn't cry. He kept drifting in and out of sleep, muttering for his mother whenever he woke. The volunteers searched every list, every shelter, every evacuation center. No one matched her description. Days later, the truth reached the shelter quietly. She had not survived. The boy stayed among other orphaned children, many too young to understand what had happened. He rarely spoke. When he did, his voice was soft, barely above a whisper. At night, he sometimes jolted awake, convinced the water was rushing toward him again. Counselors showed him drawings, maps, toys, anything to help him feel grounded, but he always returned to the same memory. Waking up on the mattress, feeling it rise beneath him when everything else was sinking. Months later, he was placed in a school built for children who had lost their families in the disaster. When a counselor asked him what he remembered most vividly, he didn't mention the wave or the fear. He said he remembered holding on because he didn't know what else to do. He remembered the mattress keeping him afloat when the world underneath him had disappeared. He carried that memory with him as he grew older, not as a symbol of luck or fate, but as a reminder of endurance, what it means to survive even when everything you love is swept away. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more true stories of life, death, and the will to survive.